Swear to God, why can I never figure out if this is the normal camera angle? Like, am I okay? The answer is no. But hey guys, it's Izzy, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a kind of April and May wrap up. I'm going to do it a little bit differently from how I usually do my wrap ups because I was too ill to do my April wrap up and my May wrap up. So I'm gonna kind of combine them. I will be doing my normal wrap up for June, but basically I read 36 books combined in April and May, and that's too many to talk about. So I'm gonna go through all the books I read and what star rating I gave them, and then I'm going to talk about the 5 worst and the 5 best that I read during April and May. So I'll be talking like in depth about 10 books rather than 36. And yeah, I might like tell you the genre. I don't really know, I haven't really figured it out, but yeah, I didn't want to bore you to death, and honestly it's kind of hard for me to remember because some of these I read when I was quite poorly and my memory is not good of them, so I don't know if I even have anything valuable to say. But yes, that's enough talking. Again, like I said in my last video, for the foreseeable future I will be leaving links in the description box to resources to support the Black Lives Matter movement. I will also be leaving some book recommendations by Black authors, specifically queer books by Black authors. So yes, if you're ever interested in those resources, they will be in the description box. I don't know, probably forever. There'll probably be just a new edition because I think that it's important, and you know, I just want to make those resources accessible. And yeah, let's get started with this wrap up. Also, I won't be talking about any rereads that I loved just because I've probably already mentioned them, or if I loved or hated, either way, just because I've probably talked about them in previous videos, so I'd rather talk about like the new books that I either liked or didn't like. So yeah, I'm just gonna start by going through all the books I read and the star ratings I gave them. Sorry, the lighting's kind of dark. The sun's gone in. So yeah, the first book I finished in April was Tilly and the Book Wanderers by Anna James. I gave this book 3 stars. It was a middle grade light fantasy and it was very sweet. I read Dangerous Remedy by Kat Dunn, which I gave 5 stars and we'll be discussing later in the video. I reread Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. I gave that 3 stars. I reread Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett and I gave this 5 stars again. I read Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. I gave that 4 stars. I read Music from Another World by Robin Talley, which I will be discussing later. I read Ghost Squad by Clarabelle A. Ortega, which was like a middle grade spooky ghosty book. It was cute. I read Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare, gave it 5 stars, we'll be talking about that later. I reread The Magic Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton, gave it 5 stars, it's a childhood favourite for me. I read Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare, I gave that 2 stars, we'll be talking about that later. I read The Gravity of Us by Phil Stamper, I gave that 3 stars. It was fine, maybe like a 3.5 star. It was like a good read. I read This Time Will Be Different by Misa Sugiura, I think is how you say it. I gave that 4 stars, good read. I read The Tales of Beedle the Bard, gave it 4 stars. That was prior to J.K. Rowling making herself even more of an idiot. I hate her so much. Unrelated, but we don't stand. Just so we're clear, trans lives matter, and J.K. Rowling is absolute trash. Like, she's below trash. Like, she just belongs in like the gutter. I can't describe my hatred for her, and I just want to make that very clear that every trans person or non-binary person is safe on my channel, and this is a safe space, and I do not condone any of J.K. Rowling's actions. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that, but I just wanted, again, to make it clear that this is a safe space for everybody. I read Bonds of Brass by Emily Skrutsky. Have mixed feelings about this. It was a good book. A little bit problematic in that she's a white queer woman who wrote about queer boys who are like people of colour. So I don't know. I haven't heard anyone like be really angry about it, because obviously I want to listen to my POC peer reviewers, and like I haven't heard anyone like slate it, but I do think tread carefully with this one. It was a good book, but after looking into it more, it's probably one I won't be continuing or supporting. I just feel a bit iffy about it, so yeah. I read The Last True Poets of the Sea by Julia Drake, which I will be going into more detail later. I then read It's Not Like It's a Secret, also by Misa Sugiria. I gave that 3 stars. I read Rick by Alex Gino. I gave that 4 stars. I DNF'd All Your Twisted Secrets by Diana Urban at 50%. We'll be talking about that later. I reread The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman. I gave that 4 stars. I reread Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli. Is it a perfect book? No. Is it problematic? Yes. Was it my introduction to sapphic reading? Yes. Does it hold a special place in my heart? Yes. So I don't know. I love it, but I do respect the issues, and I understand the problems with it, and if anyone hates it, honestly, that's fine. It's just a special book for me. I then read The Deck of Omens, which is the second book in the Devouring Grey duology by Christine Lynn Herman. Gave that 4 stars. I haven't written a Goodreads review, which I'm kind of frustrated about because I wasn't well enough, but it is something I really wanted to write a review of, but I feel like I need to read it again to write a review of. But it was a really great conclusion. I read Roll With It by Jamie Sumner. I gave that 2 stars. We'll be talking about that later. I read Small Steps, The Year I Got Polio by Peg Corrette. Gave it 4 stars. Really good memoir. Really solid memoir. Sorry if you see my phone. There's my dog. I reread The Selection by Kira Cass. Don't blame me for my trash reading. I was too ill to concentrate on anything else, okay? I read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. Gave that 5 stars. Talking about that later. I reread The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. 5 stars. Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. 5 stars. The Elite by Kira Cass. They all get 2 stars. They suck, but okay, just don't judge me, okay? I read Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins, gave that 4 stars. The first 2 are better, so therefore the third one gets 4 stars. I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I gave that 3 stars. I will be talking about that later, even though I didn't think it was the worst book. I just have some things I want to say. I read The Boy in the Red Dress by Kristen Lambert. Unfortunately gave that 2 stars. We'll be talking about that one later. I read The One by Kira Cass. It's better than the other one, so I gave it 3 stars. I read Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I gave it 4 stars. I read it in preparation for the TV show. I really enjoyed both. They are pretty different, but I think they both have a strong message, and I think they both really bring something to the table. I read Date Me, Bryson Keller by Kevin Van Wy. I gave it 2 stars. We'll be talking about that later. And the final book I read in May was The Fascinators by Andrew Eliopoulos, and I gave that 3 stars. It was very average, is basically all I have to say on that. So, we're going to start off with my 5 least favourite books of April and May, and then we'll move on to the 5 best. The first book I'm going to talk about was an e-arc I read. It's out now, but that was Date Me, Bryson Keller by Kevin Van Wy. I gave this book 2 stars. It basically was pitched as To All the Boys I've Loved Before, meets Love Simon, I think is what it was pitched at. It was definitely pitched as To All the Boys I've Loved Before, along with something else. And it basically is about a boy who takes on a dare that he will date a new girl every week, or is it every 2 weeks? I can't remember. There's a dare involved. He's like the most popular guy in school, called Bryson, and yeah, he accepts this dare, but he doesn't actually say the dare isn't dating a new girl every week, it's just dating a person every week. But no other boy has, tried to go around that loophole. And basically, our main character ends up asking Bryson out, and their relationship develops from there. My two main problems with this, although there were cute moments, and again, I did write a Goodreads review for this, but my main problems were time frame. This book took place over 2 weeks, and in that time, Bryson and our main character had to meet, he had to ask Bryson out, they had to go on dates, they had to like each other, they had to love each other, they had to fall out and, go apart and then come back together in the space of literally less than 2 weeks. So you can see there's a problem with development. I just hated it so much because I was like, oh my god, why are they like thinking about love when they've literally been dating for like 6 days? Like, it was just preposterous. Like, it made me so angry. My other problem was there were too many public outings. I do not think books for teenagers should include any public outings, in my opinion. I think they're unnecessary. I think they're really traumatic for queer people. And I believe, especially in teenage books, that outing should be promoted as the queer person's choice, is only their choice and only their decision as to when and who they want to come out to. And I know that public outings do happen in the real world, but I think when writing for teenagers, whether they're queer or not, it shouldn't. I just think it's really awful, and these were quite like traumatic public outings as well, and it was just really unpleasant to read about. And then finally, like, the subtlety of the messages was just, it had the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Like, I obviously want the themes of, queer people should have just the same rights as everybody else, and they should be able to date who they want to date, and like the public outings aren't good, but we should all know that. And like, it was just the messages weren't shown by the story and the characters. It was like the characters just like needed to define what was wrong about whatever happened, and it just felt very like forced and fake. And obviously I want these actions to be condemned, and I want, you know, characters to have repercussions for what they did, but it was just too like in your face and just too like, oh, that's bad, we shouldn't do that. It just was not a well crafted book, it wasn't a well told story, and I just didn't like it. But a lot of people seem to, because it's got like a 4-star rating on Goodreads, so I guess I'm in the minority, but I usually am. So the next book that I didn't enjoy was The Boy in the Red Dress by Kristen Lambert. This was very kindly sent to me by Penguin Random House, which I'm super grateful for. I'm just going to put it there while I talk about it. But this basically is a mystery that's set in the 1920s, where a girl works in this like speakeasy place that her aunt owns, and her best friend is a boy who does like drag every night, and he's gay, and basically a friend of his gets murdered and he's the prime suspect, and she wants to figure out who actually killed this girl so that she can make sure her best friend isn't put in prison. I wrote a Goodreads review on this, but honestly it was just stupid. Like, everything was either way too easy or just pointless because they didn't get any information. Like, there was no in between. The characters, the main character Millie was childish and ridiculous, and the relationships weren't developed, and the writing, there was so many words about things that didn't matter and so much description that had no effect. Like, it wasn't world building, it was just like, there's a dog-shaped salt shaker. Like, no joke, it was so detailed. I don't even have anything else to say on this. I only gave it 2 stars because, like, it wasn't problematic, but it was just a really, really poorly written book. I seem to be in the minority here because everyone else seems to have loved it, so if it does sound interesting to you, I guess maybe give it a go, but if you have a similar reading taste to mine, like if we sync up on a lot of books, I would suggest not reading it. I'm then going to talk about Roll With It by Jamie Sumner. This is a middle grade book about a girl in a wheelchair. I think she has cerebral palsy. I think that's her disability. Let me check. Yeah, it's about a girl with cerebral palsy who loves to bake, and I don't know why my camera can't focus on my face. There you go. And yeah, she has cerebral palsy and she loves to bake, and her grandfather's health is deteriorating due to Alzheimer's, and so her and her mum have to go and live with her grandparents to support them. And so she has to start a new school and have new friends and stuff. Originally, I thought it was Own Voices, which is why I picked it up, but it was actually written by the parent of someone with cerebral palsy. And my Goodreads review just says, "Parents of disabled kids, stop writing books about disability like you experience it, challenge." I am disabled. I am a wheelchair user. I've been disabled since I've been ill since birth, but I've been in a wheelchair since I was 13, and I'm 21 now, so 8 years, and I've experienced pretty much everything you can when being in a wheelchair. I have a lot of other health conditions, but I'm going to kind of talk about, like, being in a wheelchair, like that kind of aspect, because it does focus quite heavily on the fact that she is a wheelchair user. My main issues were, one, she was made to live in a trailer park where there was no accessibility to the things she needed to give her independence, dignity. Like, she had to have her mum do so much more for her than when she was at home, because they didn't have the equipment there that she had at home because it was too small. So she had to give up a lot of her dignity for them to do that, and that was never acknowledged. It was just, like, expected of her. And secondly, she complained so much about having a aide at school. So like disabled people, I'm sure it's different in America and the UK, but they often have someone who helps them go from class to class, carry their bags, do their writing for them if they need help actually writing. And I had an aide in senior school, high school, for 2 years, and then I did homeschooling. But I needed help getting from class to class, and that was it. Sure, would I have chosen it? No. Who would? But was it the worst thing in the world? Absolutely not. It meant I could go to school, and it meant I could get from one place to another, and it meant that I could do my work. And when I tell you that, it's made to be the biggest deal ever. This girl literally hates having a classroom aide, and I understand that it's not what you want, but from my experience, no disabled person has ever been that upset about having a classroom aide, because it just means they can do the things that they need to do. and it's not the end of the world. And like, you could just tell this book was not written by a disabled person, because the things that they complained about, the way they were treated, the way they were expected to just get on with things, the way their peers spoke to them, none of that was okay. And the book made it seem like it was, because it wasn't written by a disabled person. It wasn't written by someone who has experienced a wheelchair, who has gone to school in a wheelchair, who has had a classroom aid, who has been in places that are not accessible to them, who have had to deal with the loss of dignity because of accessibility issues. None of that's okay, and in this book it was made to seem like it was okay, and it's a middle grade book, and I don't want children to read it. I want them exposed to disabled people because we're everywhere, but I had so many issues with how this portrayed disability, and basically the message I got from it was you should just be fine with however you're treated if you're a disabled person, and like, that's the message I do not want people to get. And I also think the autistic rep in this book, it was a small part, but it was also super harmful, super stereotypical, and not okay. So I felt very strongly about that book. I hated it. Then I read All Your Twisted Secrets by Diana Urban, which I DNF'd at 50%. It's a murder mystery. It's kind of like One of Us is Lying, which I haven't read, but I know exactly what it's about. But it's about a group of teenagers who are in a room, and they say, like, in an hour you have to poison one of you and kill one of you, and then the rest of you can go, or they'll kill all of you. And I was so bored. Like, I was bored to tears. I could not read any more of it. Like, it literally killed me. I had to DNF it. It was so boring, and I had predicted exactly who was behind it and like what the reasoning was by like 20%, and I looked up like spoiler reviews to check I was right, and I was. It was obvious, it was boring, dull, stereotypical, just bad. Basically, it was bad. And the final book I'm going to talk about is Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. I mentioned this in my... what video did I just film? Oh yeah, my mid-year book freakout tag. So I'm not going to talk about it in depth. You can watch that video to see why it was my most disappointing read of the year so far. But basically, I love Chain of Gold. I love The Red Scrolls of Magic. I was hoping that I had got into the groove with Cassandra Clare. I read Lady Midnight. I hated it. It was boring. It was unsatisfying. The characters were bland. The relationship was exactly the same. It was just Clary and Jace 2.0. It was just dragged out. There weren't really any redeeming qualities in summary. So yeah, that got 2 stars. So after that negativity, we're going to move on to the best books I read in April and May. First one I've already talked about multiple times because I'm in love with it, and that is Dangerous Remedy by Kat Dunn. This is a book set in the 1700s French Revolution, and it follows a group of characters who are teenagers who will jailbreak anyone from the prisons, it doesn't matter which side of the revolution they're on, they'll just do it, and they're kind of a neutral party. And they get this job to jailbreak a girl, and when they find her, they realise that she's a lot more valuable than they first anticipated, and she has powers that could change the outcome of the Revolutionary War. And so hijinks ensues. They are being followed by both sides of the revolution. They're trying to keep this girl safe. They have to do some heisting. They have to do some like dangerous things, and they have to kind of make a decision about like how they're gonna resolve it. And it's just a really, really fast-paced, interesting, exciting read with a bunch of queer characters. There's like 5 main characters. two of the girls are sapphic and have a on and off relationship, and one of the boys is gay. So it's super queer, it's super fun, super interesting. Really liked the historical fiction element of it, and it's definitely a favourite of the year. Again, I said that in my mid-year book freakout tag, so you can watch that. Another favourite book was Music from Another World by Robin Talley. This was another 5-star read, and it followed two girls in the 1970s and what they became pen pals. Oh, focus on me. Can you do it? Can you focus on me? I know you can do it. I believe in you. There we go. They're pen pals, and they both go to Catholic school, and one of them is gay, and she gets outed to her very, very religious family, and she has to leave. And so she goes to the only place she can think of, which is her pen pal's house. Although they've never met, they've kind of become really solid friends over their letter writing. And so she turns up in San Francisco and asks to stay at her house, which she can. And it kind of follows them as they become part of the San Francisco queer community, and they start working at like a feminist women's book club, and they discover a real passion for like punk rock music, and they may or may not have feelings for each other, and it may or may not be a sapphic best friends to lovers, and they may or may not be incredible. And yeah, it was really interesting to learn about queer culture in the 1970s. It focused quite heavily on Harvey Milk and everything he did for the queer community, and it was just a beautiful book about queerness and friendship and acceptance and finding your community and finding your family that you choose. And it was just so heartfelt and beautiful. And I've read almost all of Robin Talley's books, and none of them have ever like just really stuck with me, and this one is by far her best, and just such a beautiful read, which I just think anyone will enjoy. It's just I just want everyone to read it, and it's sinfully underhyped. Everyone should check it out. It's so good. Another 5-star was Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. I reread The Infernal Devices in preparation for Chain of Gold, and I enjoyed The Infernal Devices second time around. Didn't love it, didn't hate it, just was a goodish time. I then read Chain of Gold, which follows the children of the characters in the Infernal Devices series, and it's set in like the early 1900s, and I loved it so much. It was not a perfect book by any means, but the good things so outweighed the negative things that it just was a 5-star for me. I fell in love with the characters. The story was so intriguing. There were so many different plot threads happening. It was so engaging. I literally just loved every character, even though like the cast is enormous. I just fell in love with all of them. I think the character dynamics between them all was so interesting. The relationships, the familial relationships, the expectations. It was also layered and developed and just really interesting, and I just like read it so fast, and I was just like obsessed with it. And so that was a really nice surprise, because I didn't know if I was gonna like it, because Cassandra Clare and I have a rocky relationship, but I did write a super detailed Goodreads review, so I will link that in the description box, and I'd really appreciate it if you checked it out, because I worked hard on it. Another 5-star book, which I read with the Sapphic Book Club, which I will leave in the description box, and that was The Last True Poets of the Sea by Julia Drake. I'm just gonna leave that here. This is a book that follows our main character. What's her name? I'm so bad at remembering names. Is it Violet? I feel like it's Violet. Yes, Violet. And she has been sent to live with her uncle in Maine for the summer after her brother attempts suicide and is in hospital and like is it rehab? Not rehab. Like, you know, where people go after they commit suicide, like a therapy, I can't think of the word, but like a therapy place where they stay. And she has to deal with the grief of almost losing her brother, whether she had anything to do with what happened to Sam, her brother, whether her actions, had consequences. She has to deal with the fact that she was kind of an alcoholic, even though she's so young, and she'd really got into so many bad habits and hung out with so many of the wrong people and just did things she didn't want to do. And then she meets some people in Maine and becomes really good friends with them, and they're lovely. And she falls for one of the girls in the group. I think they're both bi, the girls. And it's just this really beautiful book about family and friendship and love and self-acceptance and forgiveness. And I just felt so many emotions reading this, and there were so many lines that just really hit my heart. There was quite a lot of talk about survival and how you keep going, especially through things like depression or just like really traumatic things that have happened to you, etc. And that's something that's personal to me, and reading some of those lines just like hit me, and it was just such a wonderful experience of feeling so understood. And the whole book club loved it, like everyone adored it, and you should absolutely check it out. And it's also like so beautiful. The last 5-star book I'm going to talk about is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and then I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts on the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. But Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo is her 3rd book. It's written in verse, and it follows the stories of 2 girls whose father dies in a plane crash, and through that happening, they discover that they are sisters. They didn't know of each other's existence, and they weren't aware that their father had any other children except for themselves. And so it follows these 2 girls who are dealing with the grief of losing a father, but also the grief of losing the image of a father that they thought they knew. And so while grieving for his physical presence, they're also having to process the fact that he was a liar, basically, and he had sort of a whole secret life that he kept from them. And it was a really, really beautiful exploration of family and friendship and sisterhood and what it means to be a woman, because one of the girls lives in America and one of the girls lives in Dominican Republic, and the kind of opportunities and the way women are treated in both of those are quite different. And it was really an interesting exploration of feminism and what it means to be a woman. And also one of the girls has a girlfriend, which is super cool, and like their relationship is just like really healthy, and they just really support one another, and it's just a really nice relationship. It's not a main focus by any means, but it is just a really nice addition. And I just think the writing was beautiful. I think the themes were so well explored. They were so well executed, and I just think Elizabeth Acevedo gets so much more talented with each book, and I don't even know how that's possible. I just think she's an absolute genius, and this book was so touching and so heartfelt, and it was just beautiful. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, which I gave 3 stars. This is a prequel to the Hunger Games series, and it follows Coriolanus Snow, who ends up being President Snow in the Hunger Games, and the 10th year of the Hunger Games, and it kind of follows his descent and starts us off kind of where he turns down a different road and becomes President Snow. If I hadn't read the Hunger Games series, I think this would have been maybe a 4-star, because I do think it's just such an interesting concept. But because I love the Hunger Games so much, and that series is just so good, It just couldn't compare to that. I do think it was really interesting to look at a man, a white privileged man, who at the start of the book seems, friendly and caring and empathetic, and he slowly starts to have less care for human life, and he slowly starts kind of treating humans as something like separate from him, and he kind of slowly like raises himself above almost everyone. And I think some people were expecting something more intense or think the book was kind of pointless. And while I do think the book was slow and could have been different, I do think it has a validity in looking at a way that as soon as you start treating other people as something other, and as soon as you start seeing them as below yourself and you make moves to put yourself above them and to make choices where you're not thinking about the outcome for another person and you're only thinking about what it will do for you. I do think it was an interesting study in seeing how, because obviously in the Hunger Games, like, he's full on evil, just, you know, just killing people left and right. And so I think it was an expectation that he was going to become purely evil in this book, and instead it was just kind of this slow look at how someone you think is a good person can become something so evil. And while I do think it was a bit boring and I think it could have done a lot of different things, and I would have liked it to focus on like Hunger Games, like with Finnick or like Hamish, that's what I would have wanted from a prequel. But still, I do think it had an interesting look at the descent some people go down and the fact that you don't just like turn evil overnight. And I also appreciated how it wasn't like, oh, something bad happened to me, so now I need to like be a bad person because I can be, because people would like mean to me. And it was kind of all pretty much focused on Coriolanus himself and his actions and his choices. And sure, external factors, factored into it, but it really was his decision, and I think that's interesting. So I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. So I would say try it if you are interested in it. But yeah, those are all the books I'm going to talk about. Thank God I didn't try and talk about it anymore because I've already talked your ears off. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I hope you're all well and I hope you're enjoying my slightly more regular content. And yeah, my next video will probably be my June wrap up. I've read a lot of queer books and I've read a lot of books by black authors, and I'm excited to talk about them. I'm also super close to 700 subscribers, which is absolutely crazy, and I'm so grateful for every single person who has subscribed to me. Like, it's honestly such an honor, and I just feel thankful every single day. And yeah, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!